Hey there, this is Andrew. I hope you're doing well. Today we're finally going to be finishing up our photosphere project. In the last video we worked on our interface and now we have to put the finishing touches on our buttons. So we're going to be putting some thumbnails on them as well as creating some basic animations for when we select and deselect them. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a quick look at some thumbnails. And I've already imported them into my project. If I go to my textures folder and go to thumbnails, I have these very simple pictures where I've basically made a selection and I've deleted the corners so I have an alpha background. But you can leave these as any shape if you want to. You may also be able to do this with the mask and engine. But what we're going to be doing is setting these in our environment library. So if we go and select that, and we expand our environments, and we expand all of our little guys, we'll have the thumbnail field that we put in a few videos ago, I believe. So we'll just click those and put those in there. Hopefully I can match them up correctly. That all looks good. I think I just have them in order. And now we're going to create some animations for our icons just so we can have a little bit of feedback as we're cycling through them. Let's go to our interface. We'll expand our canvas and we have each of these images here. And we're not going to do anything fancy at the moment. If you want to make these a prefab, then you can. But I'm just going to select all of them and add an animator to it. And what we're going to be doing, I'm going to hope that this works, is we're going to be using an animation override controller to use the same animator that we created for our interface, but we're just going to be replacing the animation with ones that scale rather than change the transparency. So if we go to our animation folder, we have the animation controller that we created in the last video. And if we right click in our animation folder and we go all the way down to animator override controller, and we'll call this icon. And we'll drag this interface controller in there. And if you remember, we have our hide animation as well as our show animation. And we can basically use the same transitions in the same format. And all we have to do is replace exactly what we wanted to do when we're going between those transitions. What I probably could have done a bit better was making the animations named something that made a little bit more sense for both of our contexts, but that's not a big deal. So now that we have that animation controller, if we select all of our images, we'll drag that on there. And let's see what happens when we click on our animation tab. And as we can see, it's defaulting to that hide and show animation that we had for our canvas group for our interface. But it's yellow since we don't have a canvas group on this object that it can use, or childed to it. So I think the easiest way would just be to create the animations in our animation folder and set them on the controller, and then we'll edit them within the scene. So let's go to our animation folder. We'll right click and we'll create an animation, and we'll just call this an_enlarge, and we'll just duplicate that and we'll call it shrink. Cool, now let's click on our icon controller, and when we want it to hide, the equivalent of that will be for it to shrink, and for show, obviously it'll be enlarge. Now let's click on one of our images again and we'll see what we get. And now instead of those default animations we get from our interface, we have our shrink and our enlarge. So let's create a shrink animation really quick. Let's click our record button. Well, it may actually make more sense to do our enlarge first, so let's do that. Let's click enlarge, we'll hit the record. And we do want it to start at a scale of 1 since we want it to go from a scale of 1 to something a bit bigger. Kind of like before, if we just change one of those values, it's going to just create a keyframe for us really quick. And then we'll do 1.1. I think that might be good. Let's double click that image to get a closer look on it. Oh, I forgot to move my frame head actually. So let's undo that. Let's just do, if we just move the scrub head and we just do 1.1, it should give us what we need. And that looks pretty good. Now we just need to change 1.1 for everything. There we go. And then if you want to see the actual values, you can actually expand this and we'll have our 1.1 and it all starts off at 1, which is pretty helpful. Now that we have an enlargement value of 1.1, let's go to our shrink. We'll hit record and we want it to start at 1.1, so we could set all of that. And to keep it the same, we'll go 1, and let's make sure that looks good. Yep, that looks good. That looks good so far. Let's stop recording And let's go to all of our images to make sure they all have animators, which they do. And before we create the additional code that we're going to need, we actually need to create an icon script for these. Let's compress that folder. We'll right click, create an icon script, and then we'll select all of our icons and we'll drag that onto it. So now we just need to open up our interface and our icon script. So here we are in our icon script, and this is going to be pretty simple. All we're going to need to do is get our animator, and then we're basically going to reuse some code that we had in our interface. So let's get rid of these two, and we'll create an awake. And we'll also need to create a variable for our animator. And then we'll set it really quick. And then we're going to go to our interface script so we can copy some of the code that we have for our animator set trigger for our show and our hide. We'll copy that. We'll put that in here. But we'll just call it select and deselect. And this may seem a bit silly or maybe even a bit redundant, but if we have an icon that we may have some different information or extra functionality, we can put that here. But since it's pretty simplistic, I'm not worrying about it too much. So we have our select and our deselect. And if you remember, since we're using that animation controller, we're using the same parameter. So we'll still be using that show and that hide, but we could probably should have renamed it something like, actually like select and deselect. That may have been a better choice. Or idle and active, maybe something like that. Okay, enough of the parameter naming. Let's go to our interface. And let's scroll up here. And what we're first going to do is we're going to create a public list for our icons. And that's going to be those images we put our icon scripts on. There we go. Can't seem to type this morning. We'll initialize that to null. And then we want a variable for whatever our current selected icon is. Because once we go to the next one, we'll need a current one that we want to deselect. So we'll write a private icon, and we'll just write selected icon. We'll initialize that to null. And all of this new functionality is going to be taking place in our select function, which if you remember, it already has our environment event. And the first thing that we're going to be doing is checking to see if we have a selected icon. So if we write m selected icon, then we want to deselect it. And this is primarily when the application first starts up. It's not necessarily when it's gonna be selected and start, it's not gonna have a selected icon already selected to deselect. So that's why we have to do this null check. Maybe if it's initialized to something, then you wouldn't have to worry too much about this. But it's also just being a little safe. I think we forgot to change our accessors from private to public since we copied and pasted that stuff over. So let's go back to our icon really quick. And we'll just make these public. Save that, let's go back. Deselect, there we go. Let's add a comment here really quick. That we'll just call this old icon or old icon. And then we'll create one for our new icon. So we'll just be setting our selected icon via that icons list. And we'll be using the same index that we're using for our environments library. And this makes sure that everything is going to be lined up correctly. And then once we've set our new icon, we need to select it so we can play that animation on it. And there we go. One thing that we haven't done yet is we did set those thumbnail values within our environment library, but we need to apply them to the images within our scene. So let's create a new function down here at the bottom. We can get rid of this print statement. And we're just going to be calling this function fill icons. And the argument that we're going to be passing in here is our list of environments. And we're going to just do a for loop where our index is going to be 0 and it's going to be less than our environments.count. And then we'll do I++. And then within our icons list, we'll be using that I. And as I'm typing this out, I think we're going to have to add the namespace for the Unity Engine UI really quick. Just to make it a little bit cleaner when we're writing this out. So instead of just having a big long line for the icon and then getting our image component so we can set the thumbnail, we're just going to set it in a variable really quick. So we'll just say image thumbnail output. It's going to be equal to our imicons I game object get component image. And if we wanted to, we could get this image within our icon script, but we're only going to really be using this one time. If we were cycling through them or setting them more frequently, it may be good to cache them, but for right now, it's good just to get it here this one time, and we're not saving them for future use. So now that we have our thumbnail output, we have thumbnail output sprite, and then we'll be getting our environments using our I index again, and then we'll get our thumbnail value. And there we go. And now that that is all set, we'll scroll up so we can call it within awake and say fill icons, and we'll be passing in our environment library. .environments. There we go. All right, and this looks good. I think we need to set some values in our inspector for our icons, so let's do that now. So let's go to our interface, let it compile really quick, and now we have our icons right here. We'll set it to a size of 4, and then we'll just put our images in there. And I'm going to make sure to keep them, we'll see what order they're in actually, because I know when I copied them out, I kind of did it in a weird way. So that would be the first one. Maybe we should have did this a little bit of a different way. That'll be that one, and then 2, okay. There we go. So I just wanted to make sure that they were in order, from left to right. And to double check, we have 3, we have this one, we have 1, and then we have 2. So that's good. Now let's hit save and let's try and see if this works. So if we press spacebar and then we press one of our arrow keys, we'll see that we're getting the enlargement on our circle that's second from the right. If we click left again, I think I have it backwards actually. Every time I hit left, it's going to the wrong one. But everything looks to be in decent order. I think I may have put them in opposite order. But other than that, it looks pretty good. So let's check that really quick. Alright, so I was actually looking at it backwards when I set my images in order. So I've gone ahead and reordered them, but I haven't set them within my interface yet. So let's click on that really quick. And one thing to keep in mind is where the camera is, which I wasn't doing. So if I check and make sure that the camera is looking in the direction of the interface, and then we select it, we want to make sure it's going left to right. So I have from left, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which previously I had it 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's reset all of these really quick. And one thing you can do so you don't have to worry about this is passing the entire environment to the icon and then using the value from that when you are setting the environment as well as the icon. But since this is a more simplistic version, it's not that big of a deal. So let's try that again. So if I hold Control and I go to the right, it's all working pretty well, and it'll wrap around. And there we go. And now this works in Editor, but let's build this out to our Oculus Go to make sure that it's working correctly. So I just tested it on my Oculus Go, and I realized that I have a few things that we need to fix, particularly in our input. And at the very bottom of our player input script for our right press, I had it set at get down, so we need to update that to get up. And then we're not even firing the touchpad right event, so let's up that update that as well. I forgot, I also, for the left press and the right press, we're also using the OVR input touch when we should be using the button. So we'll change that really quick as well. Now, this should work. Hopefully it does. And everything seems to be working pretty well. Our interface is popping up and we're able to cycle through each of our photospheres with our fade pretty easily. And that about does it for this video and this series. Thank you for following along. In the future, we're going to be working on a lot more Steam VR and hopefully some Oculus Quest projects in the near future once it's released. But if you have any problems, feel free to leave them below, and I'll see you in the next one.